They say Babylon was once the heart of the world, a city so advanced, so powerful, it rivaled the imagination of gods. And then, it vanished. How does a city that shaped civilization, gave us some of the first written laws, and stood as a beacon of knowledge for centuries, simply disappear? Was it swallowed by time, buried by sand, or erased by those who feared its legacy? You've probably heard of the Tower of Babel, of Hammurabi's Code, and maybe even the Hanging Gardens, one of the ancient wonders. But few truly know what became of Babylon. This city didn't just fade. Its disappearance is a mystery so profound, it challenges our entire understanding of history. Was Babylon destroyed in war? Did it collapse under the weight of its own ambition? Or is the real story far more disturbing, involving religious agendas, forgotten texts, and secrets that were never meant to be found? Archaeologists have been digging for over a century, historians debate, and still, there's no single answer. Some believe Babylon never truly died, that pieces of it were scattered, hidden, maybe even alive in ways we've yet to understand. And then there's the silence, not just the absence of ruins, but how Babylon slowly vanished from records, from memory, from relevance. Could it be that Babylon's disappearance wasn't just a coincidence, but a deliberate act, one orchestrated to bury its influence permanently? Others argue that its downfall wasn't a tragedy, but a calculated erasure, executed by new powers who feared Babylon's dominance. As empires rose and fell, Babylon's name was dragged through myth, religion, and metaphor, until its real legacy was obscured beneath centuries of symbolism. We'll explore the moment Babylon rose from nothing, commanded empires, and eventually became a shadow in the desert. We'll follow the clues left in clay tablets, ruins, religious texts, and modern theories. And we'll ask the questions others don't. Who wanted Babylon forgotten, and why? This isn't just about a city. This is about power. Who controls it, how it's remembered, and how it's erased. The deeper we dig, the more disturbing the story becomes. By the end, you'll know the truth, or at least the most compelling version of it. So buckle up, because the story of Babylon's disappearance isn't just history, it's a warning. Long before Babylon became a legend, it was just another settlement along the Euphrates River, a modest village tucked between older, mightier cities of ancient Mesopotamia. But its location would prove to be destiny. Sitting at the crossroads of trade, culture, and conflict, Babylon quietly evolved into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The real turning point came around 1894 BCE, when an Amorite chieftain named Sumu-Abum seized control of the city. Though his reign was short-lived, he laid the foundation for a dynasty that would reshape history. Over the next century, Babylon transformed from an unremarkable town into a rising power. But it wasn't until the 18th century BCE that Babylon truly exploded onto the world stage, under the leadership of a name that still echoes through time: Hammurabi. Hammurabi didn't just rule, he revolutionized. Through military conquests, strategic alliances, and ruthless diplomacy, he expanded Babylon's territory until it swallowed rival cities and forged a unified Mesopotamian empire. But Hammurabi's greatest legacy wasn't his conquests, it was his code. The Code of Hammurabi was one of humanity's first comprehensive legal systems. Engraved in stone for all to see, it proclaimed justice, set social norms, and offered the promise or illusion of order. An eye for an eye wasn't just a slogan, it was state policy. The code covered everything from theft and debt to marriage and slavery, showing how deeply law was woven into Babylonian life. For the first time, people could point to a public record and know the rules, even if those rules were harsh. But Babylon's rise wasn't just about military and law, it became a hub of knowledge. The Babylonians were among the first to chart the stars, map the heavens, and develop a working calendar. Their math system, based on the number 60, still influences how we tell time today. They pioneered early geometry and algebra, tracking celestial bodies with eerie precision. These observations would form the foundation for later astronomy. Religion also shaped Babylon's identity. The mighty ziggurat at Temenanki, possibly the inspiration for the Tower of Babel, stood as a physical symbol of their cosmic ambition. Babylonians believed they were the chosen intermediaries between heaven and earth. They honored gods like Marduk, the city's patron deity, who was often depicted battling chaos to bring order, a myth that paralleled Babylon's rise. Culture flourished. Trade routes connected Babylon to lands as far as the Indus Valley and Egypt. Merchants brought spices, textiles, metals, and ideas. It wasn't just goods that flowed through the city, it was influence. Poets and priests recorded myths on clay tablets, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving works of literature. This wasn't just a city, it was an archive of humanity's early soul. Babylonian society, however, was rigid and hierarchical. At the top sat the king, believed to rule by divine mandate. Below him, nobles, priests, scribes, and merchants structured the city's core, while farmers, artisans, and slaves kept its engine running. Law maintained order, but that order often came at a price. Punishments were harsh, and inequality was institutionalized. Still, for all its might, Babylon was more than a machine of empire. It was a vision, a dream of order in a chaotic world, a promise that law, faith, and civilization could stand above the desert winds. Even enemies respected its systems. Babylon was admired, feared, and emulated. By the time Hammurabi died, Babylon wasn't just a city, it was the capital of the world's first great empire. His successors struggled to maintain the same level of control, and over time, the empire fractured. Rival kingdoms reclaimed land, internal strife weakened the core. But the name Babylon had already taken root in the human imagination. It would fall, rise, and fall again. Yet its ascent during this golden age, from humble beginnings to imperial glory, is one of the most astonishing transformations in ancient history. It was the blueprint for future empires, a model of how law, religion, science, and power could merge to shape a civilization. And it's this rise, this golden mythos of Babylon, that would one day make its disappearance all the more haunting. To understand the fall of Babylon, we first have to remember just how high it once climbed. If Babylon's rise was impressive, its golden age under King Nebuchadnezzar II was nothing short of legendary. He didn't just inherit a powerful city, he transformed it into the glittering jewel of the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar reigned from 605 to 562 BCE and was not just a king, but a visionary builder. Under his rule, Babylon became the largest city on earth. Towering walls surrounded it, stretching over 11 miles and wide enough for chariots to race side by side. The city's gates, especially the iconic Ishtar Gate, were covered in glazed blue tiles, adorned with dragons and bulls symbolizing the gods. These weren't just defensive structures. They were statements. Babylon was telling the world, we are untouchable. At the heart of the city stood the legendary ziggurat known as a Temenanki, believed by many to be the biblical Tower of Babel. It soared toward the heavens, an architectural marvel meant to bridge the mortal world with the divine. Beside it was a temple to Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon. Religious festivals like the Akitu New Year celebration drew thousands, reinforcing Babylon as both a spiritual and political center. But nothing symbolized Babylon's magnificence more than the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Though still debated by historians, ancient texts describe them as a lush terraced paradise with exotic plants and flowing water suspended above stone platforms. Some say Nebuchadnezzar built them for his Median wife, to ease her homesickness for green mountains. Whether fact or embellished legend, the very idea captured the imagination of generations. Economically, Babylon flourished. Its position at the heart of Mesopotamia allowed it to control trade across land and river routes. Markets buzzed with goods from Persia, India, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. Artisans crafted exquisite jewelry, ceramics, and textiles, while scribes documented transactions, prayers, laws, and myths on clay tablets that still survive today. Babylon's intellectual life also reached its peak during this time. Scholars studied astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and divination. They could predict lunar eclipses, interpret dreams, and calculate complex equations, all without the benefit of modern tools. Their knowledge was inscribed in cuneiform, a writing system so precise it allowed ideas to travel across time. Babylonian engineers were equally advanced. They designed complex irrigation systems to channel water from the Euphrates River into farms, gardens, and city fountains. Hydraulic technology supported the fabled gardens, showing a fusion of innovation and beauty rarely matched in the ancient world. But it wasn't just material wealth and science that defined Babylon's golden age. It was its cultural influence. Stories like the Enuma Elish, Babylonian creation myth, and Epic of Gilgamesh were preserved, not just for worship or entertainment, but to define what it meant to be human, divine, and in pursuit of destiny. Babylon became more than a place, it became a symbol of civilization itself. Yet for all its glory, Nebuchadnezzar's reign wasn't without controversy. His military campaigns were brutal. He crushed rebellions, including the infamous siege of Jerusalem, during which the first temple was destroyed and thousands of Jews were taken into Babylonian captivity. This act not only altered the course of Jewish history, but also stained Babylon's image in biblical narratives, a reputation that would echo through religious texts for centuries. Still, to those within its walls, Babylon was paradise. Gardens bloomed. Temples echoed with chants, markets thrived, education and religion walked hand in hand. It was a world where gods and kings shared power, where the boundary between myth and reality blurred. Nebuchadnezzar's death marked the beginning of the end for this golden age. His successors lacked his charisma and capability. Political instability crept in. Factions vied for control. And while the city remained magnificent for a time, the cracks had begun to form. But in those golden years, Babylon wasn't just a city. It was the very definition of greatness. It was humanity's attempt to touch the divine, to build eternity from bricks and dreams. Its influence didn't end with its walls. Long after its fall, artists, theologians, and historians would invoke its name. Babylon became a metaphor for excess, for power, for pride, and for the price of glory. Even in ruin, it remained immortal. And as we'll see in the next chapter of its story, the higher it climbed, the more dramatic and mysterious its fall would be. The splendor of Babylon couldn't last forever. Like all great empires, the seeds of its fall were sown during its peak. And though many imagine its collapse as sudden and violent, the truth is far more complex and more haunting. After Nebuchadnezzar's death, a series of weak and short-lived rulers took the throne. Infighting within the royal court destabilized the once mighty city. Without strong leadership, Babylon's hold over its empire weakened. Trade slowed, infrastructure suffered, and the unity that Nebuchadnezzar had built began to crack. But Babylon's greatest external threat wasn't chaos, it was ambition. In 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great of Persia set his sights on the city. The Persian Empire was rising rapidly, consuming territory and toppling old powers with brilliant strategy and little bloodshed. When Cyrus approached Babylon, he didn't storm the gates. According to ancient accounts, he entered the city almost peacefully, welcomed by Babylon's own people, who had grown weary of corruption and instability. And just like that, Babylon was conquered, but it wasn't destroyed. Cyrus respected its culture and temples. He even allowed exiled peoples, like the Jews, to return to their homelands. Babylon became a regional capital within the Persian Empire, important but no longer dominant. Still, the clock had started ticking. Under Persian rule, Babylon's influence continued to fade. Alexander the Great later conquered it in 331 BCE, and for a brief moment it seemed like the city might be restored to greatness. Alexander admired Babylon's history. He planned to make it his eastern capital, but his sudden death in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar ended those dreams. Without him, Babylon's restoration never happened. As empires shifted, from Greeks to Parthians to Romans, Babylon was increasingly abandoned. The Euphrates changed its course, the fields turned to desert, and people simply stopped living there. The city wasn't toppled by fire or war. It was forgotten, swallowed by time. By the 2nd century CE, Babylon was a ruin. Its buildings collapsed, its records were buried. Travelers came and went, rarely realizing they stood on sacred ground. What remained of its name was twisted through religious stories, particularly in the Bible, where Babylon became a symbol of sin, arrogance, and divine punishment. This shift from real city to moral allegory was perhaps the final blow. Babylon, the center of ancient innovation, became a warning tale, a villain in a spiritual drama. It was no longer remembered for its achievements, but condemned for its pride. Archaeologists would eventually rediscover its ruins in the 19th century. And yet, even then, the mystery lingered. Why did Babylon fade so quietly? Why wasn't it preserved like Athens, or rebuilt like Rome? Some argue it was politics, a deliberate sidelining of a once threatening power. Others suggest it was religious, a theological cleansing to diminish Babylon's influence. Or perhaps it's simpler. When the rivers moved, the people moved, and the city lost its reason to exist. But the quietness of its disappearance is chilling. A place that once shaped the course of human civilization, just gone. What makes Babylon's fall so striking is not the drama, but the silence that followed it. No cataclysm, no last stand, just centuries of wind, dust, and forgetting. So how does a city that once defined civilization become a forgotten ruin buried under the sands? The disappearance of Babylon is one of the greatest enigmas of ancient history, and over the centuries, many theories have emerged to explain it. One of the most straightforward explanations is natural decay. Like all cities, Babylon depended on its environment. The Euphrates River was its lifeline, supplying water, trade, and fertile soil. But rivers shift. Over time, the Euphrates moved westward. Without that vital flow, agriculture withered. Wells dried up, the city's sustenance vanished, and its people followed. But not everyone believes in such a quiet ending. Another theory points to deliberate erasure. As empires rose after Babylon, they had reasons to downplay its influence. The Persians, Greeks, and later Roman rulers didn't want their people idolizing a past rival. Babylon was absorbed politically, but its culture was sidelined. Documents were lost, temples fell into disrepair, slowly, intentionally, its legacy dimmed. Then there's the religious framing, a theory rooted in how Babylon is portrayed in sacred texts. In the Bible, Babylon becomes the villain, a city of sin, arrogance, and idol worship. The whore of Babylon in the book of Revelation symbolizes corruption and divine wrath. This wasn't historical analysis, it was moral storytelling, but the effect was powerful. Generations came to see Babylon not as a wonder of the ancient world, but as a cursed relic of defiance against God. In that way, Babylon was spiritually erased, its ruins left untouched, not just by time, but by fear. Other scholars argue that Babylon simply outlived its relevance. Empires changed, trade routes shifted, political centers moved. Cities like Ctesiphon, Seleucia, and eventually Baghdad rose nearby, pulling attention away. Babylon was no longer needed. Not militarily, not economically, not even symbolically. But perhaps the most haunting theory is that Babylon didn't disappear. It was buried in plain sight. For centuries, locals built homes from bricks scavenged from ancient walls. Entire villages rose from Babylon's bones. Clay tablets used for record-keeping became construction filler. The ancient city became the foundation, literally, of newer ones. And then there are the conspiracy theories. Some believe ancient knowledge was hidden within Babylon, secrets of astronomy, architecture, even metaphysics. According to these ideas, powerful groups worked to suppress Babylon's legacy to keep that knowledge from spreading. It's a fringe view, but one that keeps the myth alive. Babylon, in this view, isn't dead. It's sleeping. Modern archaeology has done much to uncover the truth. Excavations throughout the 20th century revealed the city's structure, from its gates to temples to ziggurats. But there's still so much we don't know. Thousands of cuneiform tablets remain untranslated. Entire layers of the city are still buried, and there's Iraq's modern history to consider. In the early 2000s, Babylon became a military base during the Iraq War. Tanks rumbled across ancient stones, sites were damaged. Some feared that a second erasure, this time physical, not historical, was taking place. What's undeniable is this: Babylon's vanishing isn't just a tale of ruins. It's a lesson in how memory works, how politics, religion, nature, and time can all conspire to erase greatness. Sometimes it's accidental, sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes it's both. The mystery isn't just where Babylon went, it's why we stopped asking, why we let it vanish from the map, from history books, from our collective imagination. And maybe that's the most Babylonian twist of all. A city so powerful, it could shape the world and then disappear without a sound. Babylon wasn't just a city, it was an idea, an experiment in law, science, empire, and mythology. It reached for the heavens and left its fingerprints on every civilization that followed. And yet, today, its ruins lie silent. So what does Babylon's story really tell us? It tells us that greatness doesn't guarantee permanence, that power can be buried, that empires, no matter how mighty, can vanish, not with a bang, but with a whisper. It tells us that the stories we tell matter just as much as the facts we forget. Babylon didn't die in one day. It faded through centuries of neglect, reinterpretation, and silence. It became a myth, a warning, a villain, depending on who was telling the story. And most of all, it reminds us that memory is fragile. What we choose to remember and what we allow to be forgotten shapes how we understand our world. Maybe Babylon didn't disappear. Maybe we just stopped listening. But today, we've opened the gates once again. We've walked its streets, stood beneath its walls, and heard the echoes of its kings, its scholars, its people. And in doing so, we've honored something eternal. If this journey moved you, challenged what you thought you knew, or opened your eyes to the forgotten brilliance of the past, then don't let it stop here. Like the video, share it with someone who loves history, and subscribe for more untold stories from the ancient world. Because history isn't just about the past, it's about the truth we're still uncovering and the civilizations whispering from beneath the dust.